Hi everyone, I'm Shaylin here with Reezy. Today we're going to be talking about a weirdly contentious topic, and that is prologue. You've probably heard it said many times that you shouldn't have a prologue, but you've also probably read countless books that have prologues. So which is it? That is the question we're going to be answering in today's video, and we're going to be talking about some good reasons to have a prologue and some not so good reasons to have a prologue. A prologue is an opening section or chapter of a book that is differentiated from the main content in some way. Maybe it happens before or after the main events of the plot, maybe it's from the point of view of a different character, such as the villain, or maybe it takes a different form, such as a diary entry or a letter. So the first good reason to use a prologue is to give us a glimpse into the past or the future. Many prologues are flashbacks or flash forwards. This can be really engaging, and you'll actually see this technique a lot in TV. A lot of TV shows will begin by showing us a clip from the last episode or something late on in the season to really grab our attention. Because we kind of know what we're working up towards, there's more tension. The series I Am Not Okay With This begins with the main character Sid running down the street covered in blood. This is a really engaging way to start a series, and again, it keeps us interested because we want to see how the main character is going to end up in this situation. Many prologues also begin with flashbacks, say a brief scene that takes place some significant amount of time before the beginning of the story. Betty by Tiffany McDaniel begins with a really brief prologue that shows the main character interacting with her father when she's a young child. We're not really clear how much before the start of the story this scene takes place, but it just gives us a little insight into the character's relationship and is somewhat displaced from the main timeline of the story. If you have a point on the timeline that takes place before or after that you think would make a really engaging start, that can be a great use for a prologue. On the flip side, one thing you really don't want to do with a prologue is info dump. This is probably the main reason why people say you shouldn't have a prologue, is because a lot of authors end up falling into this pitfall, which is using the prologue as just a dumping ground for a bunch of information that they otherwise don't know what to do with. They know this information is important, they don't know how to convey it through the story, so they just put it on the prologue. This is not a good strategy. If the purpose of your prologue is solely to provide information, you're in dangerous territory unless you can show that information in a very active, interesting way. If your prologue starts to resemble a history book or a long block of text, it's probably not a very strong prologue. If the only purpose you can identify for your prologue is to provide information that you don't know what to do with otherwise, probably not a great use of a prologue. If you use the prologue as a place to just pile on a bunch of information, you'll probably lose the reader's attention rather than grabbing it. A good use of a prologue is to write a prologue in another point of view. Many prologues are very effective in showing us a point of view that might never actually come up in the story again. Say you want to give us a glimpse into your antagonist's point of view, but they're not a point of view character in the story. A prologue is a great way to show us another character's point of view, really grab our attention with another character's point of view, and then never see from their perspective again. If there's one really engaging moment or scene told from a side character's point of view, but we're not able to access this through the main narrative, if it serves as a good hook and opener for the plot, it can actually make a really strong prologue. Now, one thing you don't want to do is add a prologue just to supplement a boring first chapter. We all know that a boring first chapter is not going to do much to grab the reader's attention and might even deter them from finishing the book. However, don't see a prologue as like a band-aid that you can just slap onto a weak first chapter. Rather than trying to fix this problem with a prologue, work on improving your first chapter and make that first chapter a compelling hook on its own. Now, another good use of a prologue is to actively world build. Now, like I said, you don't want to use it as an info dump, but if you use it to build the world in an active way, it can actually be really interesting. Prologues are very common in genres with heavy world building, like sci-fi or fantasy, and that's because they can be used to build aspects of the world. Now, what you don't want to do is have just a long block of information, but if you can actively world build through a scene, it can be really compelling, especially if it's the most interesting aspect of your world. Say your world has a very unique, interesting magic system, and this magic system involves going through a ritual when you turn a certain age. Let's say when everyone turns 12, they go through this ritual that will allow them to have their magical abilities. But the book takes place when the character is an adult. A great use of a prologue would be to begin with the character going through this magical ritual, you would be able to learn so much about the world and witness something really, really interesting, and it would be a great hook. What you wouldn't want to do is just begin with a long explanation of how magic works in this world. So it is totally okay to use a prologue to world build, but know that this can easily go wrong if not handled delicately. A prologue that is only there to provide information and doesn't do so in any kind of nimble way will probably hurt the story more than it helps it. But if you can world build in an active, compelling way, it can be really, really strong. You also don't want to use a prologue just to hook the reader. Now, of course, you want to hook the reader's attention. That is one of the main purposes of a novel's opening. But if this is the only use of your prologue, it's not worth the space. The prologue needs to have more long-term and meaningful impact on the story than just being a momentary hook that's only useful for that very beginning portion of the story. So by all means, use a prologue to hook the reader's attention, but don't use it only to hook the reader's attention. One thing that is really great practice is to write a short prologue. Even though I don't think there's really any inherent issues with prologues, it is something that some readers aren't a fan of. One way to try and bypass this is just by having a short prologue. The shorter you can make your prologue, the easier it will be to hold your reader's attention en route to chapter 1. And finally, don't use one unless you're sure you need one. A prologue should be something that can't work as just the first chapter, but is still clearly related to the story and does more than serve as just a short-term hook. If your prologue doesn't really fit this criteria, maybe you don't need it. A lot of people feel pretty strongly about prologues and will say that you just shouldn't have one. Some people say that agents won't read a book that has a prologue. Now, I do think that the hate on prologues is a little bit over-exaggerated. People say that readers just skip over them, and to be honest, I've never met someone who says that they skip prologues. If you do skip prologues, I'd be really interested to hear your reasons in the comments. Personally, I don't skip the prologue. I feel like it's there because the writer wanted it to be there, so why would I skip it? I do think the statement that prologues are bad is very over-exaggerated. I think it'd be more accurate to say prologues can serve a purpose, like anything else, but sometimes they are misused. But that's the case with pretty much any storytelling element. I think it's just really obvious when a prologue is poorly used because it's the first thing we see when we open the book, so it'll stick out like a sore thumb if you're not using one well. But I do think the hate on prologues is a bit over-exaggerated. In the end, a prologue is like anything. It's something to be used with purpose and intention, and if it serves your story, then there's probably a place for it in your book. If it doesn't, then you probably don't need it, just like anything else. Does your book have a prologue? Let me know in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any new videos from us. We've got new writing, editing, and publishing tips every Tuesday and Friday. Until next time, bye.